team in the country, the Clemson Tigers. I'm Rick Tate, if you don't know me, and chairman of the Pickens County. Before we get to anything else, if you have these two sheets, raise your hand if you want one. This is what we're talking about tonight, the money and the services. If you want, hold your hand up, and Elliot will bring it to you. Elliot, we've got a couple up here on the front. And with that, we always, as always, begin with a prayer. Pastor Kelly?
All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this time that we have tonight. We thank you for the blessings that you've afforded to us in this great nation, the freedom that we have to gather tonight and to speak and to discuss, and to do so with a confidence that, Lord, we have this privilege to do so, that we're afforded this privilege. So, Lord, I pray that you would bless our time together tonight. May it be honoring to you. May our speech be pleasing. May we be respectful in our agreement. And, Lord, may this time be a time when even the differing thoughts and ideas that are brought together come forward into something that brings progress and makes our state even better. We thank you for the service of our elected officials. And Lord, we pray for wisdom as they continue to serve in the capacity that you have privileged them to serve. We ask that you give them protection and safety, not only these that are represented here, but Lord, even those in national government. And we pray for the safety of all of those. We do pray that you would bless our country and bless our nation and keep us safe and keep us free. And may we still enjoy the privileged possession that we have in these rights and freedoms here in America. We thank you for this time. Ask your blessings on it in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Would you join me in standing and pledging allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And thank you for the freedom to be able to do that. At the risk of sounding like a mercenary politician, since I've taken over as chairman, I have tried my best, falling short sometimes probably, but to facilitate conversations and bring in as elected officials that influence your life and give you access to them and give you an opportunity to get a little closer to them, be able to ask your questions of the people that represent you in Columbia and those that would like to. If you value what we're doing here, not me, I'm a small part of this. I've got a lot of help, believe me. If you value what we're doing here, we would appreciate any donation that you'd be willing to give. John, back there with the headphones on, is our treasurer. He takes cash, checks, and credit cards. So anything you'd be willing to donate, we'd be thankful for. One small bit of business. At my direction, Elliot has put together 3 resolutions. One on partisan voter registration, one on local government fund, and another one on personhood. And those are being sent to committee. And Elliot is a human who will take care of any amount of Pickens the state. That is our resolution. Getting into the members of the committee and setting up between now and committee in the morning of the Saturday, February. We meet on the executive third. The executive committee meets at Jimmy's restaurant in their little dining room up there, private dining room, on the third Saturday of each month. And we will get the report on the resolutions at that time, and the executive committee will vote on them then. I guess that's the best to go now. We're discussing government fund, and we've got a folks here about it. So if you're an elected official, would you pass the mic and introduce who you are, what's your position, or who's talking?
Try here in Pickens.
Neil Cox, District 5 here.
I represent House in Anderson.
Chris Alexiston.
Roy Costner, Council. Pickens Council.
Wilson.
Also member.
Teamster Council.
I should have had you one at a time. All this do appreciate all coming and participating in this. Neil and I had this over the last 4 different times. Jonathan and I talked about this project. And to try to set it up, and then I'll you guys and I start with Neil, go to John, pass it around, let our elected officials give their point of this. And maybe we can start a conversation. You guys can some questions. One thing before going, I don't like rules, but it's just there's no topic stay on religion, politics. Just be asked when it comes time to ask questions. Just be in this room. My invitation, or my guest, appreciate you film with. Any rate, government fund Act 1/1999, the local government, South Carolina statute in appropriation amount less than 5% of news completely must be created. The fund bill to really fund that 1.5 tune of in 50 million 2008 to 6. That's this I get. The list is who's all. I'm some services the list, but services list. All services by the county, states, whereas those services are mandated by the county. This one with all the, if you look at the top, 3 years, 2014, 2016, of how much by each county in the state was supposed to actually got just a short to the Association of Counties. Pickens backside on one, Pickens County's on Anderson County, Pickens County. They're all in that room. I'm up here by and please help me put this together and gave me the idea. This is the chairman of the county council, Cheryl from Anderson County, Karen Martin, Spartanburg County 2. Thank you for your help and coming. At any rate, that's kind of where we are, and that's where it would start. The only thing before I give the mic to Neil is the point that I've made about this from the beginning is I don't want to be taxed twice for the same service. If I'm paying the state to have a library and an animal shelter and magistrates and building codes, and they're supposed to take care of that, and that's the state's responsibility, and it makes sense that it would, because these are core government functions, services, and you've got to have a minimum amount across the state. Some counties couldn't have a library or a shelter without for it. So, when they spend the money that's required to the county to purposes, the county has to make a difference. They fall areas and even to raise up to make up my take. My only thing is all of the law. It's like Josh said before he left, there's a promise made, keep the promise. And not make Mr. Costner here have to raise taxes or have to try to raise taxes to pay for things that he shouldn't have to be paying for. With that, Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. Test, we on? Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the other chairman for attending and organizing this. Again, my name is Neil Collins, I represent Easley, and I guess what I'm about to say to this crowd may not make you happy, but I'm just here to tell you, one, some facts, and then two, some legal opinions, and then three, where I think it's going to go. And I don't think any of that is going to. I don't think any of that is going to make too many people happy. But just so you know, 4 years ago, this is the number one topic that I heard from our elected official at the time. So it was the topics that I researched. And in that research, knowing that I was going to be a lowly freshman, I knew funding was not going to be the avenue to go. But we talk about these unfunded mandates. My option was to see if we could eliminate some of the mandates. So I met with Ralph G., our county finance guy, and we went through the county budget. And the number one issue that was, at least in Pickens County, I can't speak for the other counties represented tonight, but the number one issue that was unfunded was libraries. And I see that it is on your list. And yes, in theory, it is a state mandate to have a library in your county. But as everybody here knows, that could range from one library to multiple libraries. It could range from a shack to a brand new brick and mortar building, which in Richland County, they just decided to build a brand new library. Under my opinion, brick and mortar libraries are sort of the past. I have everything that I need right here. So that sort of sets up one of the initial problems. If we're going to have these mandates, and library is one of them, then what exactly do we mean by the mandates? And if you're one that's like me, that I prefer more home rule than not, then of course those decisions are going to be made more towards the local level. And of course, when you make those local decisions, it depends on what you want to do. So we in Pickens County, I believe we have four libraries. So we in Pickens County has made the decision over the years that we have 4 libraries. The second largest unfunded mandate in Pickens County was the sheriff's office. And again, that can be one officer. It can be Barney Fife, or it can be to what we have in Pickens County, or it can be what we have in Richland County. So again, it's more local decision, and I think it's one thing in here that I think everybody in here would agree with, that we want those decisions made more on a local level. But that brings in the issue of, well, you mandated this, we should get paid for everything. And I guarantee this group, everybody would be against the decision of, let's say, Richland County, just to make some animosity, if they wanted to have 20 brand new libraries, and it was the state's responsibility to both build those and fund those. I don't think we would be too happy with that. So initially, sort of understand what state mandates are, and I think there's a little disagreement as far as what it is. And then if you are of the opinion that you want these to be state mandates, then you're asking for state involvement. At some point, Jonathan, Rex, and I are going to get involved if something happens with the sheriff's office. We're going to get involved if there's not a library or the libraries are beyond the realm of thinking. And I would imagine everybody in here does not want us involved. So again, got to think about what actually is mandate. Number two, and a big issue for me, is yes, there is a state statute that says 4.5%, but my legal opinion is that is unconstitutional. I don't believe that we can bind future General Assemblies on what they're responsible for. Just like I don't believe whenever local government fund came into existence, and I believe 2001, maybe late 90s, it's been around that long, and that's where the original 4.5% came from. They just used whatever percentage it was at that date. So basically, in effect, that General Assembly, those people that were elected in 2000, have said we have to spend 4.5% of our budget on local government. We obviously do not do that, but we don't do that with just about every bill that we have. Just last week, we had a school bus veto. I'm sure y'all heard about it. Well, Act 79 in 2007, that General Assembly said you will have to replace 1/15 of the fleet every year. Well, that's binding future General Assemblies that they can't do, in opinion. And we haven't done it. I think we've done it 2 or 3 years of the past 10. In fact, this year, when Governor McMaster vetoed that $20 million or so, it's still, we overrode it. Jonathan was the sole sustainer there. We overrode it. It still didn't meet the $33.5 million that we needed to replace 1/15 of the school bus fleet. So right there, we're again not following a formula. And then obviously even bigger, way bigger than LGF, way bigger than buses, is our education funding. We have an EFA formula that we are much further behind than we are in LGF. But again, the same logic there applies. Some facts that I think we need to be aware of, despite us not reaching that 4.5%, we are, as of since 2016, we've been over 4%, just to keep it in some sort of relative perspective. And I think there's a misnomer out there that LGF is all the money that our local governments get. What we don't get credit for is a number of other issues that total about $20 million to our local governments. And then a huge issue that people need to realize is Act 388. With Act 388, we took a huge tax relief for local governments. It's to the tune of $583 million tax cut every year. That's the reason our property taxes are so much lower. And that needs to be taken into account if you're being fair as to where revenues are coming from and where they're going. Going back to, and staying on the facts, but going back to home rule and what local governments are responsible for, today, obviously because of this meeting, met with Ways and Means and tried to get as many facts and figures as I could. And this one stuck out to me. As far as state funding with county budgets, Anderson leads the state with 9% of their county budget is state revenue. Greenville was up there at 8%. Pickens was up there at 8%. Spartanburg was up there at 6.9%. The average was 5.5%. Charleston was down at 3%. Fairfield was the lowest at 2.2%. What that means is the upstate, we take more money from the state, we rely on more money from the state than other counties do. And that makes sense to me because we're fairly fiscally conservative in the upstate. We don't increase our local millage like they do around the other parts of the state, to the point of obviously our reliance on state money is more and more. And as we continue to do that, that makes new councils even more and more strained to where they have to, at some point, catch up. Another important fact is this 5-year growth rate. The state receives the funding or the budgets from all the counties, and not picking on Pickens County just because it's where I am, but the growth rate, and I feel okay saying this because it's not you guys, it's a 5-year from 2011, 2012 to 2015, 2016, and the growth was 8.6% in that 5 years, and administration cost was 18.8%. So again, if we start saying, and we have been saying, that we want more local government fund and that we want state to give more money, what that's going to cause is more state involvement. It's just natural for it to do so. And yeah. Yeah. I will.
This is not, you get the microphone back, I promise.
Yeah. Well, last thing, I want to give the future. There is, speaking with Chairman White today, and one has a bill set up that would eliminate the 4.5%, but would have a base standard of what we had in 2016, and it would increase and decrease as the years go with the general fund revenue. Again, I'm sort of the opinion, that's the idea, and it's risky. Then also that our county is in there, number one, to allow flexibility. So if there is any mandate, you can mandate. Number two, well, it's the bill, but that proviso of giving that flexibility to its mandate. But with
I'm as guilty as anybody. I'm not picking on you. We both like to talk. So what I'd like to do is you guys have a conversation. So, give us your basic thoughts, keep it to like maybe 5 minutes, and then pass it on, and then maybe we can do a little back and forth.
All right, Rick. Okay. Thank you, Rick. I don't know if you fully appreciate just how impossible it is to ask a politician to keep anything to 5 minutes, but
okay, let's make it 10.
I'm just kidding. I'll just share my perspective, and first of all, I want to say one thing I do appreciate about Neil, even though we don't always agree on our positions on some issues, but I do appreciate the legwork that you put into looking into this. I know you did spend some time on it and looking into it, honestly. That said, I can't help but notice the fact that most of the arguments given so far that you've heard against funding the local government fund are most of them are arguments that I first heard come out of Chairman White's mouth for why we couldn't do this. Now, I think one thing that we need to really remember is let's rewind back to pre-recession days. And let's recall the fact that the 4.5%, when we hear arguments like we can't bind the hands of future legislators, let's recall the fact that the 4.5% rule of fully funding the local government fund at that level based on money that had already come in up to that point, come in the previous fiscal year, we're spending that in the following year, a predefined, predictable amount of money, that worked. That worked until the recession hit. Then when the recession hit, the state felt the squeeze, there was a shortfall, and so guess what got cut? Now, it's technically a legal workaround, technically a legal loophole, if you'll call it. The fact that we can go into any part of the budget, we can go into the budget in the proviso section, and we can suspend any state statute just for that year. any state statute in the budget bill. There's uses for that. I'm not necessarily knocking that. However, when we routinely, year after year after year, in an example after example after example, which you cited, and we routinely use that tool, I'd say we're abusing the tool that we're given, and it shows a mentality in the state legislature that lawmakers are above the law. And nowhere are we more guilty of that than in the state budget. Now, I want to address something that Rick asked me to talk about, and that is another area related to this that has more to do with process, but it's also an area in which the legislature has routinely ignored the law. And you know what? There's not even a budget proviso suspending this, so as far as I know, and that is the state statute requiring the House and the Senate to convene joint public budget hearings on the governor's budget. The governor recently came out with his budget, and there is some controversy. We're the day after the State of the State address, perhaps some controversy about the contents and the amount of spending in this budget. But the fact remains that state law requires that the House and the Senate convene and have joint public hearings so that the public, the agencies, can be heard by both the House and the Senate at the same time. Now, the current process right now is Ways and Means, the Budget Committee in the House, starts well before session even starts, gearing up, preparing the budget. This is even well before the governor comes out with the governor's budget, and begins having subcommittee hearings, public hearings with different state agencies. There's so many state agencies, you kind of do have to start early to get through them all. And the Ways and Means Committee is broken down into, do you know how many subcommittees there are? 6, 8, something like that, in different subject matter areas. And, the agency heads all come in, they give their PowerPoint presentations, they state how their programs are running, they make their ask, what they want in the current year's, in the upcoming budget, and they defend that ask. They discuss with the committee, and obviously the public can be heard. Usually the public doesn't show up. Usually it's just lobbyists and agency heads and the like, and employees. And but that's the current process. So as you can imagine, that's a very lengthy, time-consuming process, and it starts almost from day one. Well, actually, definitely from day one this year in January, from the first day we were in session, and it's still running. And that will happen until the Ways and Means Committee comes out with their draft budget, which they will put in front of their full committee. They'll vote on. They'll send it to the House floor sometime in March. The House will debate it over the course of a week, probably pass it, send it over to the Senate, and then the Senate does the same thing. All their budget subcommittees meet, bring in agency heads one at a time, hear their pitch. Then the Senate comes out with their version of the budget. It never matches the House's version, and so it goes to a conference committee, and just a handful of lawmakers end up deciding what the state budget looks like. A couple of members from the House, a couple of members from the Senate. Usually the chairman of the budget committees from both chambers end up having a seat at that table. So, I'm thinking, number one, if it's the law, we should follow it. Number two, there's some real merits to this law, I think. I mean, wouldn't it be great to streamline our process? I mean, if I were a state agency head, wouldn't I rather come in and make my pitch once rather than twice, maybe even 3 times? So, it would make a lot of sense that we would start with the governor's budget as a draft, working copy, adjust that, through the outcome of those joint hearings. Probably make the whole process go faster. Now, some attention started coming to this a few years ago. Basically, the response we got from Chairman White about why don't we follow this law, and he says, well, we've never done it that way. We haven't done it that way in decades. This is how we do it. And oh, by the way, the Senate won't cooperate even if we do try. And, my contention is that, be that as it may, you're not trying to bring Leatherman to the table, Senator Leatherman. That would be my response to Chairman White. You're not trying. You're not trying to follow the law. And I have a problem with that. So I I think that just kind of on principle is kind of where I'm coming from on this. That the rule of law means something because there's a hierarchy of law, right? And guess what? Lawmakers at the State House and the State Senate, we're not the top of the food chain. I think we are, but we're not. There's a higher law. There's the state constitution beyond that. There's the law of God, what our founders referred to as the law of nature and of nature's God. What our consciences tell us are right and wrong that we can't violate no matter what law we care to pass may contradict that. I also want to just kind of address this argument that we can't bind the hands of future legislatures. Number one, why didn't we ever hear that argument pre-recession? Why are we suddenly hearing that now that pressure is being brought to bear? It's almost as if some clever staff attorney invented this and everybody said, yeah, that sounds like a good counter-argument, we'll say that. I don't know if that's how it happened or not, but I'm just saying, from my perspective, that's kind of what it looks like. The reality is, whether you're passing a budget proviso or whether you're passing the budget bill or whether you're passing another law to amend current state law, the reality is, if you pass a law that applies to the legislature or legislative process, you're not binding the hands of future legislatures because the future legislatures can undo that law if they so choose. They can pass another law to change it. So I think the argument, personally, I think is bunk. So I think it's just one more way that we provide excuses for doing what ultimately we want to do. I don't think that it's right for the state, because we're unwilling to rein in our spending, control our spending, prioritize our spending, that we then hand the problem, pass the buck down the food chain to you guys at the local level, municipal level, and say, you deal with it. You cut services or you raise taxes. It's a no-win scenario for you that we impose from the state level. It's not right.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just one thought I had listening to the two of you. Neil made a good point on Richland County has a lot bigger, more services to provide than Pickens County does. Do we want to help pay for what they have in Richland County as opposed to what we have here? If they want 20 libraries, should I be helping pay for it? I think there's a simple solution to that, just per capita funding. If you've got this many people, here's the minimum funding we're going to give you. We're not going to give you unlimited to do whatever you want to do, but if the library is, I'm just using that as an example, not picking on libraries, just saying if we're going to fund libraries, we will give you so much for the number of people you have in your county. If you want anything past that, then you got to pay for it yourself. Yes.
Sorry, I want to make a comment.
Well, I shouldn't have started comments till I wanted to take them. I broke the rule myself. But I wanted to say that before it popped out of my head. But Chairman Costner, would you like to give the county's point of view on this, or your point of view? Got the state's point of view twice, so let's hear from the county. Push up on that button, it should come out on. Try it now.
Hello. Okay.
There you are.
So this is one of the things that we've had a lot of conversations about. When county council, when we get 4 new people that came on board, and we all got together, and they said, well, are we going to hate the state delegation or not? And we said, well, we don't. Are we supposed to? But what we wanted to do was sit down and talk, and we've had lots of conversations about this. And I spoke at your last delegation meeting of trying to understand the why. I think the general public, we just can't understand why. When you look at, and I got Ralph to pull the numbers. Since it was since the unfunding began, $13,537,513 for Pickens County. So when you think about, as we begin to look at the jail, as we begin to look at those things that are not just mandated but necessary, how do we get to the why of why it's not funded? And I understand what you're saying, and I agree with a lot what he's saying too, in the sense of, man, it's bigger than just you, it's bigger than just him, but it is really going to take a a concerted effort to get to the point to where we do have things funded. And I wrote down a question to think about. So whatever that funding is, if I go through this list that he put out here of the services provided by county government that is mandated that we're supposed to take care of, the amount of money that you gave us to take care of all these things, I don't think it would cover it, especially when you start getting into the jail and the sheriff's office and the libraries and the magistrates and building codes. And so I guess I'm okay with whatever decision we come to, but it's complicated because we hear, well, it's state law this way. Oh, well, but we're going to suspend the rules, so it's not really state law. We're going to make up a new one every year. And to hear, well, we've always done it that way, I'm tired of hearing that in council chambers when they say, well, we've always done it that way. Well, we're not always going to do it that way. I do appreciate what each of you guys do and understand the insurmountable task of sitting down and going through all these committees and figuring out who does what where. But we've got to get to a point where we know what money's coming in so that we can make good, educated, responsible choices based on what the people in Pickens County want to do to be able to. I mean, we don't have enough money to build 12 libraries. Okay. Then we'll figure out another way. I'm like you. I think I get most of my information on that phone over there. That's how but there's a lot of people who still like to go. We just want to get to the point where we know this is the way it's going to be. Y'all are going to follow the law as whatever that law is. And then we can make our plans and budget appropriately. And then we can have a good common sense conversation with the people in our districts and say, here's what we're doing, here's how much it costs, and here's why. We got to get to the why. And it's very confusing, even being an elected official, very confusing for me. Good gracious, I'm sure it's very confusing to Pop sitting up there on the hill in Liberty, who's going, I have no idea what you guys are even talking about, but all I know is I want to make sure I have these services that are supposed to be provided for me. So the challenge is, how do you guys get to the why? I did hear from the South Carolina Association of Counties, I think Rex, you can probably speak to this too. They're making the recommendation from the committee, the revenue committee, to go to a fixed base, similar to what you were talking about. As long as we get to here's what we got, here's what we know we got, then we can plan. But I don't know how you plan when you're going, well, we want to do this or we need to pay for this and we don't know. It's like it's not supposed to be a surprise. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to break it down more to where I don't want to get into the politics of it. I could care less about the politics of it. You know, when all I want to know is that you guys got our back and that you're going to do everything that you can to make sure that you get all you can for the counties and the districts that you represent. And I believe that you're going in that right direction. What I don't want to do is get to where, well, it's going to be a surprise, so y'all just plan that way. If that makes sense. I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you.
Oh, you're great. I mean, you're good. Josh, would you come up? Josh is the chairman of the Spartanburg Republican Party. Yeah, it's the right party in there. But Josh is the chairman of the Spartanburg Republican Party. Josh is the person that kind of brought the focus on this and had some news conferences and got it in the paper and got people talking about the local government fund again. And actually, if it wasn't for Josh, we wouldn't be here tonight. So thank you for doing that.
That's all they can do.
No, it's the truth. I mean, it's easily given.
Like to start a fight in Spartanburg. We do that.
But anyway, I had originally intended, Josh does a radio show, and I had originally intended to start off the night with Josh talking because he's, like I said, he's the one that kicked this off. But he had to get here from his radio show and was a little bit late in the process. So I want to give Josh a chance to speak his piece on the subject.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, it's good to be in Pickens, and thank you all for having me here. Chairman is right. It took me a little while to get here. Maybe that's one of those local government questions, why 123 is a parking lot. But it's I did have the governor on tonight, so we were doing the State of the State recap, so I couldn't blow him off. I thought about if I could pre-record, but I didn't want to blow them off the day after the State of the State. So it's good to be with y'all. And, well, I'm usually project a lot, so normally I'm the louder one. It is good to be out here because I know this is a county that's willing to fight on these issues as well. And we did kind of start this in Spartanburg. And I see some of our good Spartanburg guys here, and Jared Spencer's over to my left, and Karen Martin, and kind of my ally in this war, the Spartanburg County Tea Party in the back there. So I was invited recently to a fundraiser for Chairman Brian White, and I told my friend, I said, you don't want me there for that because I don't think I'm on Brian White's Christmas card list. And that's okay, because what we made pretty clear in Spartanburg, we feel like this is an unfunded mandate question. And the approach we have taken, and I think this is true for every county in the state, it's not that we're asking for more money. I don't really do government handouts. I'm not a fan of them. I just don't like unfunded mandates. I don't like being told we've got to pay for X, Y, and Z and then not being given the money that rightly collected in that county to pay for those things. Ultimately, that requires a lot of tough decisions by county councils and city councils that I don't think any of us want to be dealing with. I mean, we had a bruising battle recently on what to do even about infrastructure in our own county. So what I'm not a fan of are property tax hikes. My personal opinion is that the worst form of taxation, and you can differ on this, but I don't like progressive income taxes either, but I certainly don't like property taxes. Because in my opinion, we fought a revolutionary war over the idea that you can own your own property. And frankly, the higher the property taxes go, and those go in perpetuity, it doesn't matter how old you are, you in effect live on a land lease, right? And we can agree on that. We in effect live on a government land lease. And I don't like the notion that at 65, 70 years old or whatever, you've got a family farm, you've paid for it, and it's taken from you. So when you hit local government funding issue, to me, is inextricably related to the sanctity of private property rights, because indefinitely what happens is counties and cities talk about increasing millage rates or talking about property tax hikes. We don't want that. So we started looking in Spartanburg County alone. We said, all right, we're not going to make this about our county alone. We want to make it about all 46 counties in the state. But whenever we look at over our budget for these past years since the recession, I mean, it's $4 to $5 million every year, and you go back to about 2008 and 9, it's even more than that. And when you start asking the county to shell out $4 and $5 million in a relatively small county, I mean, we're the fourth largest in the state. But we still consider ourselves to be small, right? And Pickens is smaller. You start thinking about the budgetary strain that puts on people and the kind of tough decisions that are made. So we said, look, we're going to start a fight because we felt like some attention needed to be brought to it. It's been discussed by a few folks here and there. So we did a press conference. And we were kind of hopeful some folks would show up. Well, the state newspaper showed up. The Post and Courier did. WSPA, WYFF, and all those guys. We were impressed at the attention we got out of it. And we've had overwhelming response to what we said we wanted to do, which is very clear. And I called the lawyer we were working with on the way over here. We've gone ahead and retained counsel. Now, we did it in the best possible way. We retained it for free. You know how hard it is to... That's fiscal conservatism there. I think it's because I paid this guy $50,000 for a legal battle a few years ago that was my own. So I think he owes me a couple of dollars. But we got an attorney who's doing some research right now. We're digging through case law. And I got to tell you guys, right now it's encouraging, and it depends on which day it is. It's encouraging and discouraging, right? Because we all know that the courts are fun, right? It's kind of like a roulette table. I tell people I don't gamble unless I go to court. And I feel like that's pretty much what it is. So it all comes down to who's the judge and what kind of mood is he or she in that day. But we've looked at the case law here, and we feel like there's some precedent that's for us. And there's going to be the folks, and Brian White says, oh, there's no case at all. You can't win this thing. He actually said on WSPA in response to me, bring it on. So I said, great. I called the lawyer, said, get ready to file the suit because the chairman wants to go. Our attitude is simple. I don't think you can go and strike a law that's been in place since Governor Campbell by proviso. I just don't think you can shove in one little proviso into the law and say we're going to change the budget. We're going to change local government formula that dates back to the days of Carroll Campbell. So the question that will go to the court is simple. Can the legislature just keep sliding the same proviso in there every year and stripping local government funding and then forcing those local governments still to provide the services they don't got the money for? And I hope the court's going to rule in our favor. The only group I hate worse than the legislature, sorry guys, is the court. So it's going to be a gamble. So we've said, we made it clear at our press conference, this is what I've said anywhere in the state I've discussed this, even in the state executive committee for the party, is we want a political solution first. And my goal would be is we can get the proviso taken out, that we don't have this inserted this year, and we don't have to deal with this again. I've also been asked if it was Spartanburg County's intention, and because we're trying to lead this effort across the state, are we trying to go claw back for all these years since 2009? And the answer to that's no, because that would be about $400 million, and y'all don't have the money. And $400 million, in my opinion, would give Leatherman an excuse to raise taxes again. I don't want to give him that. So we're not trying to go back. We're not trying to retroactively claw back. I don't think that can be done. I mean, at this point, what's happened has happened. What I'd like to do is stop the injury going forward. And so that what our stance has been real clear. We're going to go to every district we can and talk to as many legislators as we can. I got a radio program. We've been hammering it pretty hard. We want every legislator to hear the message. We want you to vote against the proviso. We don't want a budget that's got the proviso. And yeah, I mean, we're even telling the governor, just veto the whole dang thing if they got the proviso. I am willing. It's going to sound like Chuck Schumer. I'm not willing to shut down the government over illegal immigration. I'm just willing to shut it down over the local government fund. So I think that's what we want to do. I mean, shut it down, would you? I mean, I want the governor to veto the entire budget, and I want y'all to vote against any budget, and I want the people on the Finance Committee in the Senate and House Ways and Means Committee to vote against recommending out to the full body any budget that has that proviso in there. Now, if it doesn't, we've already got the lawsuit ready, so we'll see you in court if you do it. And we meant it. When we said we'd sue, we meant it. We may not win, but I tell you what, it'll be a bruising battle. And we want a political solution first, and the political solution is take the proviso out. And let's fully fund the local government fund. Or we can do another thing. Here's another thing we can do. Just cut the mandates. We'll do one or the other. I mean, we said that in the press conference. Do one or the other. I'm not asking for handouts. We're not asking you to give Spartanburg County more money. We're just asking you not to tell us to do stuff and then not give us the money. I mean, tell us to do stuff and not. The idea of telling us to fund $7, $8, $9 million, $10 million in government services a year and then giving us half the money is ludicrous. That's junk. So our answer is pretty simple. Either just cut the mandates, scale them back, let us deal with it ourselves, or fund it. But this idea that you put mandates in place, then don't fund it is just like what Washington, D.C. does. And I get real sick of hearing legislators talk about, and I'm not talking about all y'all, but we got them in our county too. Trust me, they love me right now. I get sick of hearing legislators gripe about unfunded mandates from Washington and Congress when they do the same dang thing at the local level. So if we didn't like when Barack Obama did it, and we don't like when Congress does it, then don't do it. I mean, this is South Carolina, and we're going to hold them accountable because the local governments are getting the same abuse from the General Assembly that the General Assembly gets from Washington. It's like Russian doll's budgetary version, right? You got the big abuse from Washington, you got smaller abuse from the state government, and then the counties abuse the cities. It's insane. And somehow the crazy cycle has to stop, and so our answer is we're going to travel all over the state, talk to as many people as we can, see if we can't get the proviso removed or shut down just kill the budget until we can. And if all else fails and come this summer, y'all pass a budget with the proviso in there, I'm going to do something Republicans don't do very often. That's get real litigious. And hopefully my lawyer doesn't charge me for it. So with that, I'm done. I mean, look, we got a group online right now. It's we put up a Facebook page, the Local Government Accountability Project. We're getting ready to roll out a website to coordinate this around the state. Y'all can listen to Common Sense with me. You can go to my website at joshkrimble.com. We have info. 92.9, but good job. Yeah, almost. It shows how much you listen.
You pop up on my Facebook every day. I don't have to touch the radio.
So we'll keep you updated. But, I mean, do you want me to answer questions?
Rex wants to mic. We was taking turns going around the room.
Henry wants to go ahead of me. He's got a bunch of questions.
All right,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Good question for you.
Okay.
Josh, my own. Okay. A couple questions. Jonathan talked earlier about the fact that the budget process, and I served in the House for 16 years,
Right.
12 of those on Ways and Means. And the budget process, in my opinion, does not go to zero-based budgeting. And I believe we ought to do that. And in order to do that, I think we ought to go to a budget every other year instead of an annual budget. I think that.
I like to go to a legislative session every other year like Texas, but that's my opinion.
First of all, what's your opinion on a every other year budget?
Well, I mean, I'm fine with it because I'm for an every other year legislature. I mean, I have said that over and over. I think we're the greatest state in the union, and I think we're better than Texas. In fact, if you go to Saluda, there's a plaque that we're the birthplace of Texas. But Texas runs their government a lot better than we run ours. And a part of that's, I think, doing what you just said. They have a 2-year budget. They have a 2-year session. I'm fine with that as long as we go. I mean, I think the principle is still fiscal conservatism and having a balanced budget. That doesn't mean borrowing money on the bonds, but I'm fine with it every 2-year budget.
I believe we could go to a budget year and a legislative year. We could flip-flop them back and forth and make an adjustment if we need to. Second question, you're talking about provisos.
Yep.
You're talking about the local government fund proviso. Are you familiar with the lottery fund proviso that's in there that is suspending us or stopping us from spending the money that was promised when the lottery was funded? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, and in my opinion is I think provisos that change the original intent of laws that were passed by the legislature and signed by the governor are wrong. I mean, that's the wrong way to govern.
That proviso, we generate about $400 million in the lottery right now. We're about $400 million short of funding education at the level that, by statute, we're supposed to fund it.
Right.
And that's local government money also coming back to fund our local school district. So
right.
That's hitting us. This is 200-something million. That's 400-something million. So we're really being hit.
You want me to lump that into the lawsuit too?
I'd love for you to do that.
I'm fine with that. We'll just go after them on both.
I made a point on that last year. I put a note in the Journal in the Senate. I plan on attacking it again this year.
I agree with you completely on that. I mean, I completely agree with you, and you're right. I mean, the same principle. I mean, it's the same principle that you've got provisos that change the original intent, and I think that's insane. I think it's a bad way to govern.
I don't have a question for Josh. I have a point that kind of came up when I was listening to some of the other folks, and it kind of goes to what Rex was just talking about. Roy said, we all have to decide whether or not we're going to hate the local legislators or not. Well, I don't hate Rex, and I'll tell you why I don't hate Rex. I have a lot of respect for Rex. Rex shows up to meetings and he works. On the Cattlemen's Association, Rex shows up and he's carrying the coolers. He's not there for a photo op. He's there to work, right? So above and beyond, you clean up the side of the road. That's the kind of thing you want from your legislator. You want to know they're going to work for you, right? You want to know they're on your side. You want to know when they show up, it's not just to get their picture taken. Well, I can just say that about Rex. That's not the case. Rex shows up. So when we talk about... see,
you're not supposed to give them the money while we're standing here.
Right. So, you choose who you like, right? You choose who you love, and I'll tell you, you can stand behind a guy that shows up for it. And Rex is talking about the $400 million that's not going to education. Well, you're talking about a $1.7 million hole in the budget here in Pickens County, but it's a up to a $15 million hole in education in Pickens County. That's $900 per kid. So when you think about that, when we hear these euphemisms about, I wrote one down here, catch up with what they need to be funding their their local communities, or you hear euphemisms like do what you have to do from the delegation, what they're basically meaning is raise local taxes. You raise taxes, and you raise taxes because we're not sending it to you from the state. Well, the maximum amount that we can raise taxes locally for schools is about $750,000. We did that just last year, right? So that's 20 years of tax increases to make up for what these guys are taking out of our pocket by proviso. And you'd have to do that in 1 year, but you can't do it in 1 year. So every year you're going to be raising your taxes to get an incremental piece of what these guys said that they would pay us. And they didn't say they would pay it by just one rule.
Sure.
They did it with the pension.
Well, and here's what I'm going to say, because I have to be, and y'all forgive my rudeness, but I have to be back in Nate Leup's home county for a dinner 15 minutes ago. This is my night, guys. It's crazy. What I want to do is extend to you, Rex, the invitation to come on the show next week. Let's just lump it in. Karen, let's start another war. Maybe I'll call another press conference. Look, the principle is the same. And I agree with you. I mean, I don't like the fact, a lot of y'all at the local level get a lot of heat because you're forced to do a lot with very little. And I understand that. I mean, look, there's a lot of impulse, and I'll say this and go away. I've worked pretty closely with our Spartanburg County, and about half of my, by the way. But the point is, I also lumped in at local level then. As wanting to raise taxes at the time, wanting to increase millage rates and all this stuff. You're put into a fairly tight box. And I frankly think that folks like Chairman White are perfectly content with that, because in Spartanburg County, all the heat has been taken by the county council for years. Really, because things haven't been funded by the state legislature, because most people don't even know about this stuff, right? Local government fund, most people have no clue. And that's not an insult. Most people have busy lives. They just don't hear about it, and the media doesn't talk about it. So my opinion is a lot of that local pressure people feel to raise taxes or fees or whatever is really pressured on us by the state. So in my opinion, we get a two for here. If we can actually get these provisos removed and we can do something about local government funding and education funding through the lottery, if we can return the money to the rightful place or eliminate the mandates, then we'll know which counties actually want to hike your taxes, right? Then we'll know who's the fiscally irresponsible, profligate spenders. And then we can go after those folks. But right now, I think that the bigger target needs to be the House Ways and Means and Senate Finance Committee, because this has been abuse on par with what Washington has done to the states, and it's been ignored for too long. And I'm thankful all y'all folks in Pickens are going to raise a ruckus with us about it and come and see us in Spartanburg. We'll join forces on it. You know, Battle of Cowpens happened not far from where we had that press conference. So thank you all. Appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you for coming, Josh. I know it was a hustle to get over here.
That was good. Thank you.
And for what it's worth, Nate in Greenville, Cheryl in Anderson, and I here in Pickens County support what he's doing and stand behind him, and we'll do anything we can to help him, right, guys? So he's not alone. Spartanburg County is not alone, and he is picking up help from the other state chairmen around the state and the other state parties. So we were passing the microphone around. Henry, you got anything else you want to say, my friend?
Well, I do want to finish the thought there. So last year we got $2 million locally, $2 million more for schools from the state, and when we got it, they had already spent $1.8 million of that. So if they're going to give you, $20 and spend 18 of it, that's not the greatest situation to be in. But they took 8 of those dollars out of another pot that we were already getting. And so at the same time, the delegation stands up and says, we're going to have a teacher shortage. We're going to have a teacher shortage. We've got to take care of teachers. But they cut professional development for teachers by 10% to get that they've already 9 out of $10. Then they tell us we need technology in the classroom because it's a modern workforce, and they cut that by 10% to give us the money over here that they already spent 9 out of $10. And the funniest one is career and technology. The legislators that get up and tell you they're all about bringing jobs to your community, and it's all about the workforce, and it's all about the people that they're going to do those jobs, right? And then they cut career and technology education funding by 10%. And so when you guys are talking about what do you do about it? Well, if you voted for the budget that cut those funding to give us more money that you've already spent, that's a problem, right? We're asking you to go down there and not vote for stuff like that. And your average person will never see it. Mr. Sada's spent a lot of time over the last 12 years or so trying to tell people what gets spent, what comes in, what comes out. But just keep that in mind. They give us $2 million, and they spent 9 out of $10, and a chunk of that money was already money they were supposed to give us for things they tell us that are important. So all we're asking for on the school board side is just some consistency. Send us the money, and give us the freedom to really operate in a way that's effective. We can't change the day we start school to any earlier than the amount that Horry County tells us. So maybe we could be more efficient if we could start earlier. We can't change the length of the school day without 3 or 4 years of effort. Think about that, the length of the school day. Kids aren't getting PE, they're not getting enough recess, they're not getting enough activity. Youth diabetes is through the roof. But we can't change the time of the day so we can have PE every day. You've got to go to the state for that. Just little bare bones, little things like that. Just take curriculum completely off the board. All those little bare bones, little things that you could do to better manage your organization, we got to go to the state for it. They're going to mandate that we spend the money, and then they're going to mandate how we spend the money, and then they're going to take money they were already giving us for things and do it. All I'm asking for is just some consistency. And they were talking about just tell us what it's going to be next year so we can plan for it. We never know until just right before it happens. There's rumor and whatnot. We never know what we're going to get, and we never know how much of it they're going to spend for us. So when I hear things like, well, we can't obligate, future legislators, you can obligate the future counties and the future, educators in the counties. If you can obligate us, why can't you obligate yourself? Just meet your commitments. The real big statement here is you don't got to be right alone. You also got to look right. So it might be some kind of legal mumbo-jumbo argument that you can't do this or do that. But the smell test is just not passing. You told us we got to do it. You told us you would pay for this. You passed Act 388. You passed, the lottery. Give us the money you said you would give us, or give us the freedom to really run the government. So You know, it's something that it upsets me because I know for a fact it's hurting the kids. It's hurting our ability to educate. We do a great job of very leanly educating kids in this county, but this is not just politics, man. This is kids. So quit talking and start doing.
Nobody ever accused Henry of being shy. One last thing, but and I'm not trying to put you off, but is it? Yes, I am. Senator, is there anything else you wanted to add? Anything else you wanted to talk about? I know the law that you had pre-filed on the provisos. Anything else you want to add to the conversation? No. Please step up here.
Just very quickly, you're talking about the proviso law. I did put in a proviso.
Yes.
I call it a daylight or sunlight, whatever you want to call it, on provisos, so that when you put a proviso in and cut money out of local government, you got to spell out how much money you cut and where you're taking that money and where you're going to spend it. Same thing on the lottery money. That's why I introduced that. I pre-filed that in December. It's in the or on the desk, maybe in the drawer of the chairman of finance right now. So I've got an idea where that's at. Yes, sir.
Senator, is it possible to limit the number of provisos you file? It almost makes sense that it's acceptable to file one when we're going through recession, but to keep doing it over and over and over is roundabout of the law. Is it even possible to have a law limiting how many provisos on the same subject?
I second that. I mean, it's proviso, not to interrupt, it should be a stopgap measure, right? 1 year, maybe 2.
2, 3, 4, but just going and going kind of doesn't make sense.
You're talking about continuous years in a row. In other words, you filed it in 09, 10, 11, 12. Quite honestly, there is the only thing that's close to permanent law in Columbia is in the Constitution. Everything else can be changed. So you could file a bill that says you can only file it for 1 year, and then after that it's got to go away. Then all you got to do is suspend that law. So, I mean, that's wishful thinking, quite honestly. But with that, I'll stop. I know we're running out of time.
If there's anything else you'd like to say, let this gentleman go, and then Chris, you've been awful quiet tonight. You can go next if you'd like. Then we'll open it up to questions. Or Carl, if you'd like to speak, you're more than welcome.
Okay. I'm Rocky Burgess with Williamston City Council. I've heard so far tonight from county councils. I've heard from local school board folks, but I haven't heard anything from the city folks. And I'm in my second term, so I want to give you some examples that I've seen in the town of Williamston. In my second term, I've seen a couple of things happen. Number one, retirement has been passed down to us from the state. We didn't screw it up, guys. Local government didn't screw retirement up, yet we're the ones being forced to pay for it. We've had recently a public defender come to our city council and state now that the state legislature has allowed public defenders to come to us, and now no longer do the tickets fund the public defender's office, but now we have to contribute to that as well unless we want to provide our town attorney to defend public defenders or defend our defendants. Stormwater. We've had stormwater come up that we've also had to pay for, and roads. You don't even want to get me started on roads. The town of Williamston has never, ever built any road whatsoever within our town limits. That's always either happened by the county or the state of South Carolina. But if you read state statute, if X amount of people, I forget whatever the population number is, we're now responsible for roads. Okay? We have zero funding for roads. The only way we get roads resurfaced or paved or whatever is to go before the C Funds Committee, which we have zero representation on the C Funds Committee. There's no municipal elected officials on the C Funds Committee. That's a problem. Okay? The counties grab that money and typically use that for their funding purposes and leave us out to dry. Okay? Act 380. Okay, go ahead.
I'm a little familiar with this subject. We've been debating that one back and forth for several years, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think is the process trying to give more roads back. We've got one of the smallest states.
Give us the money with it
I was going to say they're going to have to change the funding process so that if you make whoever you make responsible for roads, you have to make the funding available to do it. But we're like one of the smallest states in the nation. But we've got what are we ranked? Third or fourth in the number of miles of highway? Fourth in the nation. in the number of miles we have, and it's because the state has taken possession of so much. They've taken on more than they can handle in a lot of ways. I'll say that. So it's going to have to be kicked back at some point. The roads will be better kept, but the funding's going to have to be there too.
Sure. All right. Well, here a couple more points that I want to make on that. My point being, in the year and the couple years I'm in my second term that I've been on city council, I've seen revenues decrease from the state and our expenses increase and the mandates increase. I've heard, several of our local state elected officials talk about, we want to get out of local government. We talk about home rule. That's not what I'm seeing on the local level. I'm seeing more intrusion into our activities, particularly with Act 388, which limits us to what we can do. The mandates that have been passed down to us to fund have far exceeded the local revenue, the revenues we're getting from the state level.
Well, let me ask you a question. How much now? We've been talking about county delivered state services, but to be honest, I'll plead ignorance on this one. The city providing state services, I'm unfamiliar with. So you've got mandates to the city of Williamston for state delivered or to
we
deliver
absolutely
state
do.
service?
Now, whether they're mandated directly by the state legislature, I don't know. But I can tell you, DHEC will mandate that we do certain things with stormwater. That comes with a cost. That's not free. Okay, those are things we have to do that are mandated by the state. Here's my point. Here's what's happening. Act 388 limits how much we can raise taxes. The town of Williamston, I didn't vote for it. Chris, my friend here, did. But I didn't vote for the tax increase. Anyhow, long story short, the maximum amount of revenue, the maximum increase we could do in millage generated $20-something thousand. That was $11 per household, $20-something thousand a year in a several $1 million budget. That is a drop in the hat. Act 388 tied our hands and bound us. But let me tell you what happens. Cities, we hire good attorneys. They're real smart. They figure out loopholes around law, so they say, okay, we can create a fee. All right? So what we end up doing is feeding the crap out of our residents to make up for that shortfall that we have on local government fund and what we can collect in taxes legally, and we become a fee state versus a tax state. The government should not be in the fee business, period. Shouldn't happen. But that's what we're forced to do because our legislature ties our hands with what we can do. There's a remedy for rogue municipalities that decide to tax too much. It's called elections. We have them every 4 years. If you don't like what your elected officials are doing at a local level, get rid of them. Get you guys in. But I'm telling you, it is a tremendous, tremendous task for us to balance a budget every single year without doing something other than raising fees. Because taxes, it's not an option to raise taxes. It doesn't generate enough revenue.
Yeah, raising taxes is about the least popular thing you can do, too.
Absolutely.
Chris
did it, not me.
I'm not going to beat the dead horse. I mean, I believe we've said the same thing over and over. I agree with most everything that's been said. I don't believe in big government. I think that's pretty simple. I think Representative Collins hit the nail on the head. The state doesn't need to be floating county government or local government, but by the same token, the state doesn't need to put the mandates on. So either we decide, yeah, we're going to fund you 100% so that you can do the things we ask you to do, or you need to say, you know what, we're not going to fund you, but we're not going to require these things. We're going to do it on our own because their state services is passed down. So why is the money being funneled through the counties and the municipalities? So I think that's a question that needs to be answered. I'm also a realist, and I understand we have a few of you gentlemen in the room. There are 46 counties across the state. We got to get the folks in the low country, in the Midlands, and the upstate all on the same page. We can sit up here and we can solve the world's problems, but then we've got to go out and face the rest of the world in the morning. So how that happens, to me, is the ultimate question. Now, I would love for you to say, we're going to take our services back. We're going to give you any money, take our service back. Ideally, I think that would be perfect, but that's realistic, and that's not going to happen either. Now, I'm a person. If I have a year and I say, you know what, I'm only going to pay 60%, what's going to happen to me? I mean, it's pretty simple. What's going to happen to me? So that's the way I kind of look at it. That's the way I feel about it. I don't have the answer. Wish I did. But somewhere in there is the compromise.
Sounds reasonable, Chris. I always end up back here. Do what you say you're going to do. Follow the law. If you don't like the law, then change the law. And I did have a thought about the not being able to bind over the next legislature to what you've done year after year. There would be and I mean, this is talk about being simple-minded. This is a simple solution. If you don't want to do that, then put a minimum amount you're going to pay on each service, a reasonable amount, and then just let the county send you a bill and you pay it. You don't send us money. We'll send you the bill and you pay us. That's not binding anybody to anything. That's just saying we're going to give you the bill and you pay it. It's your bill to pay. You said we've got to have a municipal court, and we've got to have a master in equity, and we've got to have a medical indigent assistance program, and a clerk of court, and a probate court. Here's the bill. Pay it. That's not allocating money a year ahead or a year behind or whatever. That's just simply sending the state a bill for the service they said we had to provide, that the county had to provide. I mean, I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just saying if you sit down and think about it, there's ways to go about doing this where people are responsible, take responsibility for what they are responsible for. That's all we're talking about here. You shape it any way you want to, come about it from any other angle you want. Mr. Costner has things that he's responsible for strictly as a county, and the county's supposed to pay for it. The state has its responsibilities. The city of Williamston has its responsibilities. And everybody has got – you can't start throwing – I mean, it reminds me of when we were kids and had to wash the dishes, and I kept trying to get – no, I did it last night, get my brother to do it. We always trying to throw it off on the other guy. But didn't mean to go off on a tangent. Forgive me. Mr. Hudson, please take the floor.
You hear me? I think we all on council Chris, there's no use to me to just say that over. Problem is this. I something just come up about, and I know this was talked about giving counties a certain amount of roads, state roads. If you won't fund the local mandates, how could we depend on you to give us money after the initial payment to take these roads over? I wouldn't feel comfortable at all taking state roads because I don't know that we could get any money 2 years down the road.
That's the biggest casualty with the provisos on education and the local government fund, in my opinion, is trust. All relationships are built on respect and trust.
Now, this doesn't, I'm not pointing the fingers at these guys
no, it's not an individual
there are
thing.
2 people in Columbia. They may vote to fund it fully, but there are 2 people. What we're talking about as a group, not you individuals.
Oh, absolutely.
As a group together, how can you, if it's not been done for 9 years, how are we going to be sure if we took those roads? And I think that's kind of off the table now, but I hope it is. But they were talking about a lot of roads in Pickens County. Well, our roads are in bad shape. But I'll tell you one thing. You can go down toward Hugh Leatherman's area, and the roads get real good. And so there's an issue there. And Rex has done a lot since he's been on, and I appreciate him because he's helped us a lot, and he works well with us. We've got a problem. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not a politician. I'm on the county council, but I'm not a politician. Henry can tell you that. But I'll tell you this, I am a citizen. Eventually, people are going to get tired of the same old thing, and people are going to start coming home from Columbia. And it's about time.
Mr. Hudson, I appreciate your thought. Yeah, go ahead, Roy.
I just a question. Again, not trying to be simple-minded about this. I don't understand something. Is there a group at the lower part of the state having a meeting just like this one with the county saying, boy, we don't want them to fund us? Where are these people in the state that don't want the funding? In other words, I don't understand why y'all all can't come together. I know where you are, but who's against us? Who are we fighting against? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is there somebody else going, don't give us the money?
Anybody else can take this too. Can I offer one quick? The way the structure of legislation, especially with the executive branch that we have, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, what you end up with is what we've got is all the powers in the legislature. and you end up with people fighting for their piece of turf, getting their cheese. You know, and instead of everybody working towards the best. And I'm not saying bad people. I'm not for anybody's. I'm just saying the nature of the East, put in a situation working for the best higher state. A lot of times it ends up fighting for a change to take home for this project or that project rather than. That's what. Where do you think? I mean, I'm just imagining where the went that you were supposed to have gotten to some technical school out on the coast or in Florence or I don't know either. I'm guessing, but that's my thing. I think is the structure of the government sets where our government is sets up a foot or sets aside for everyone to get what.
To your question, there's any local government that's going to money, probably not. But see, I mean, if the lobbies that say the people associations, such counties, pushing this issue as hard as you see that, then obviously you should hear from. If they're not, I mean, a lot of politics sort of on a model, and it may be that some of these other areas that afraid of retaliation, perhaps in other areas of their budget, if they push hard. So, but I remember, and Neil will recall this when we were freshmen, came in both at the same time, and one of the more senior members was talking to our freshman class, and he said, anytime you want something out of the budget, there's two ways to get it. There's the one knee method, and there's the two knee method, and that's because it's a very top down approach. You pretty much ask and say thank you for the crumbs that you're given.
Just wanted to before give Inslee a chance. He's the last one elected official in the room, I think. Would you like to speak, sir? Okay. Inslee, you got anything you want to add to the conversation? Just wanted to make sure you had the opportunity.
I like to look at the big picture, and I was thinking, I wonder what services maybe that could be done away with. And I look at this list, I don't see a single thing that could be done away with. So looks like we're stuck with all that. A lot of you don't realize that Pickens County is very frugal. We collect less money for administration than 40 counties in the state. And it's all because of the council people who look at the budget and figure out the best way to do things. I wish everybody else could be as frugal as we are. I will say one negative thing, and that is under solid waste, we had a situation come up where this company wanted to put solid waste landfill in Pickens County, and then we find out that DHEC was going to skirt some laws and let them put fly ash from another state in Pickens County. And we're still fighting that, and we still have the legal bills for it. And I hope one of these days we can get that straightened out. That's all I really have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Thank you. Just real quick to answer some questions. Number one, Chairman Tate, the LGF is proportional, so that kind of solves your problem or your issue that you're talking about. And then Chairman Costner talking about why don't other counties, why aren't they up in arms? And I think that's the reason I shared about the upstate is more reliant, and that's because we've been more fiscally conservative at the local level, so it is pinching us harder, which I don't know which way you want to go on that. It sounds to me, after listening to everybody tonight, that you're definitely for this proviso of eliminating state mandates, but going to what Councilman Feimster says, it's going to be interesting on which ones are ignored there. Last thing on the consistency, looking back over past 6 years, it's been pretty consistent, $212 million to $220 million. So I think just like everything that we do budget-wise, you do have an idea, just like with education, you do have an idea. The question is, if there's excess, are you going to go up? And then the last thing that I would say is just want to challenge y'all on these type of issues. This is a good issue, a good case example, in my opinion. We raise these issues on this just complete black and white idea, and we end up hurting ourselves. In the run, we are hurt ourselves. Currently under funded on LGF, and the solution is we're going to get a cost of $123 million, and that is getting it off charts, as many have mentioned. Just tell us what it is. Well, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to receive the LGF, in effect, is going to have less money because of that. So not just this issue, but I would encourage you with all the issues, sort of see the bigger picture, and whether fighting to the nail, and just like Mr. Kimbrell said, of I'm going to take this even to court, it does put us in the box of, and it ultimately does, it could, and this is what I've been telling my local people for years, it could hurt us more. So just want to challenge you on that and think about that.
Certainly. Sure, Rex. Go ahead.
I want more thing. You mentioned the stormwater management and the fees that go along with that, and the fees that are charged there at the local level. That gets under my skin right there. And the reason I say that, I've got property in several counties. Greenville County, I've got a stormwater fee on a particular piece of property. The fee is 15% of my property tax over there, which is ridiculous. Now, what causes that? If you ask the local government, they say the state's pushing that issue. When you ask the state, they said the federal government's pushing that issue. So we've got to do a better job of watching these regulations coming down. We got to watch them at the local level. We got to watch them at the state level, and we need to team up with other states to fight Washington on those regulations, and just let us have our freedom at this local level.
Can I have one more point to that, too, just very briefly?
You can, but I wanted to respond to something Neil said. I don't think just like removing the mandates or doing away with the proviso solves anything. And it's the whole point to the whole conversation, to me, I'm just speaking for Rick, is these are the services, and like Inslee said, there's not anything on there that you can really take off. It is a service, and it is a state service. I don't want more from the state than it costs to provide those services, but I don't want a penny less. And anything that falls short of not funding the state mandates or the state services that are on that list, like I said before, I'm not sure if that's all of them. There could be some more that I missed. But if you fall short of not funding the state services, then it's not off the table. I'll be standing up here arguing against that, just like I am with what's going on now. Or maybe not here, but in some place, I would be against it. The point being, I said it a while ago, and I'll repeat it. Be responsible for what you're supposed to be responsible for. Pay your bills. Pay your debts. It's up to you now. I just wanted to get that in.
Okay, I was going to tell you that I did speak to Chairman White regarding this about a year or so ago, and his response to me back was, well, it's true we're not fully funding local government, but we have more money allocated toward grants to local government. And that while that may be a valid argument, it's very difficult to balance a budget on a trail grant. Okay, whenever I've got folks that I may or may not get, that does not help me with the operations of our town and these mandates by giving me a trails grant. That's great, and we love trails, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't help us balance our budget every year. Thank you.
No, absolutely. We got Cheryl. Anybody questions? Raise your hand. We'll bring you a mic.
I just want to be sure I understood what Mr. Collins was saying when he was like, we're going to get hurt in the end. So you're saying if we are told we're going to get $1.5 million and we're only getting $1 million, and then if we keep pushing it, then you'll say, well, you've been just getting $1 million. We're going to give you $1 million and forget that other $500,000. Was that what you were trying to say? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I am, and that's the exact point.
Because that I felt like the point was we're going to be hurting ourselves, which instead of us saying get $1.5 million, we'll just get $1 million and you'll shut us up that way. I mean, I didn't mean it shut us up that way, but
right. And so, local government for fully funded, let's say it's $300 million, and we're currently giving $223, and because of the principal stand of we want 4.5%, we want that 4.5%, then the solution that's been offered is to have a base cost of $223. So in the future, it won't be we're arguing for $300. It is give us our $223, just like what Chairman Costner is saying. Well, we're meeting all. And we get an example. My friend, Mr. Hill here, arguing gas tax last year. I tried to put in DOT as a cabinet agency. He fought me on that because he was more principled than me in the sense of he was trying to make the bill as worse as possible. I was trying to make the bill somewhat agreeable. And in that, that's what I'm saying is then we were left with something even worse, in my opinion. So that's sort of what I was just trying to challenge there at the end is think about the end game, because in this LGF scenario, the end game looks like it's going to be $223 million when if we had been better advocates for it, in my opinion, we would not be in a situation where we're stuck at 223. So I'm just...
Well, the only point I have is the legislature sets the rules. So if you press the legislature to do something they don't want to do, they'll just change the rules and they'll say, okay, instead of giving you 4.5%, we're going to just give you what we feel we can give you that year. And you're not going to be able to say anything. That's the point. So you just have to watch for unintended consequences. I think that's what he's saying here. Like Josh Kimbrell said, hey, the choices are either you fund this or you don't fund it. No, there's a third choice. Jay changed the rules, and they say, guess what? We're not giving you 4.5%. We're going to give you what we feel you should have this year or what we can give you, and that's all you're going to get.
I got one myself.
So you have that as a risk.
I got one quick question. We're talking about principles. How do you get around the principle? I mean, you're talking about 4.5% versus $223 million, and how do you get around the principle that just pick a simple number out of the air? It costs $100 a month for a magistrate, and you send me $75 to pay for it. You know, the point is it costs $100 for the magistrate. Pay the $100. How do you get around that principle? That's what I can't get past.
Well, I think my response to that would be our opinion would be it does cost $100. We've given $100. However, there's $400 in cost. So the local wants that full, just like with the libraries. The locals have 4 libraries. When it's a mandate to have a library, it depends on the local level how nice and how many libraries you want. And that's what I think we all want. But then at that same time, you can't come back and say, well, we want you to pay for 4 libraries.
So the answer would be, we give you the 223, do the best you can with it, and if you can only have 1 magistrate when you need 2, then suffer. Or pay for it yourself.
I don't know if I'd say it that simply.
So this is one of the first type of meetings that I've been to, but I am politically engaged in terms of paying attention to what's going on state, local, and especially local. I'm really concerned. So, and this is not personal, but from a psychological perspective, when I hear you say that, well, if you don't really go along with the game, then you're going to have unexpected bad consequences. And so for me, that's a message of fear to the heart of the people. Right? And the people are saying, well, you may try to instill fear into us by saying that, but we're here to tell you that locally we're going to find a way to work around whatever laws you impose. Now, I'm not saying do things illegally, but, I mean, the men and women who are creative, who are on our councils, we're going to figure it out. Because what we need from you, if you want us to have trust with you, then stick by the word. If the legislature has got a set of rules which says we have the authority to pass the laws, for God's sake, pass the laws. Change this program if it's not working or if you're not going to stick to it. So what I did was I just did some numbers for Greenville County because I'm from Greenville County, right? So we had a 19% shortage in whatever year it was, 2014. 2015 we had a 26% shortage, and so in 2016 we had a 28% shortage. All right? So taking a look at that, it was $17 million over 3 years. So what you're doing, not what the legislative body is doing, is transferring these costs at a greater level to the local population. In other words, to what these other councilmen and women men have said here, is that we've got to pay more. You know, we've got to get to a point of reality, fiscally and in a number of other ways within this culture, right, to where we're dealing with each other honestly, and we're saying, listen, we don't have a solution. So if at the state level they can't come up with the solution, let us come up with it. And if you're mandating these things that we have to do, then for God's sake, pay for it. Just for it. Be done with it. And let the legislative body, and I have Senator Timmons right down from our house, great guy, fiscally conservative, he's on board with a lot of this, which is let's live in reality. So if we don't have the money to pay for it at the state level, then we've got to come up with another plan. I don't have the answer, but I'm just saying, please, no fear, just deal with things as grown men and women. And that way we can move forward and come up with a solution that works. Sorry.
Yeah, we're going to have to wind things up. One more. Alan had his hand up a while ago. Much closes at 8, and we try to get out of here at 8:30. Get a chance to go home.
I've just got two-part questions for 8 representatives.
Just try them quick.
Representative, let me wrap my mind around who vote on the proviso. I know you talked about it, went over here, but that proviso to not give us the local government fund, who votes on that? The whole legislature?
So initially, the each section, each subject matter, goes to the appropriate subcommittee within the budget committee. Okay, so they vote on it first, and they give their recommendation to the full budget committee. Then the budget committee votes on the budget overall, sends that to the House floor. When it gets to the House floor, which this usually will happen in March, we will go section by section and have a vote on each section of the budget. And there's 120-ish sections of budget, and then we do that again for the proviso section. There are about 120 sections of provisos as well. So the entire legislature does vote on the record for each section of the budget currently.
Second part of that question, how did you've been down on this particular proviso?
I have voted to, and I'm vocally, oppose coming from the local. My position has been very clear from day one that if state law says we've got to do something, we ought to do it. Period. End of story. And if I could just to piggyback onto that, we actually do follow the law in areas. So why are we singling out this one area where we're not? And I'll give you an example. A lot about the LGF, what LGF is. What the CRF is? Probably nobody. Neil does. Probably Senator Rice does. The CRF is the Capital Reserve Fund. Guess what? That one gets followed because it's in the Constitution. You don't get to override that one in proviso. All right. The Capital Reserve Fund basically says a percentage of your tax revenues, I don't remember if it's 2% or whatever it is, you can look it up, goes into the Capital Reserve Fund and is to be used for, state-owned buildings, infrastructure, hard assets, whatever it is that needs to be maintained. And that's what you use that fund for. It's our state, maintenance fund, essentially. And so that gets routinely used, and the money gets set aside that comes off the top of tax revenue. So, and that's my intention. If we have a state law such as 4.5% of previous year's money, that in a way might be the most responsible part of our entire budget, because instead of budgeting a projection or a guess on what we think we're going to get, we're actually budgeting real money that we've already collected. We know exactly to the penny how much there is. So, we can do these things if we have the political will to.
Okay, the next two-part question is for Representative Collins. Same question I just asked Representative Hill. How did you vote on these provisos since you've been down there?
Well, last year I voted for the budget and passed well, I think all 4 years voted for the budget, and it is, in my opinion, number one, we are doing, in a sense, zero-based budgeting. In a sense, we're saying these are our priorities for the excesses. Last year, almost all of our excess funding went to pension, which, by the way, goes to our local teachers, our local employees, is another avenue. That $300 million that went to pension is, again, to local. The year before that, it went to roads, which went to our CTCs, which is completely county-oriented. Then the year before that, it went to education, and obviously that goes to our local. And to me, and I'll be honest, this year, if we have one extra dollar, we've already discussed 3 that we're not fully funding, LGF, school buses, and EFA. It goes in that order for me, EFA, school buses, and LGF, because we have to prioritize. We only have so much money as well. And to me, we're not meeting the law on all 3 of those, and then you have to set up a priority on that. So I haven't seen the budget, obviously. I don't know what we're going to put our excess to this year. I imagine it's, again, going to some to pension, which is, again, another priority up there. So we have tough decisions as well, and we have to prioritize.
And the second part of that question is, are you planning on running for District 5 for your seat this year?
Have not made a decision yet.
Thank you.
I got to wrap it up.
One last question.
Sure.
But for the school buses, we know the law was passed, 10, 12 years ago, for the buses to be replaced according to the schedule that we're now talking about. Why hasn't the legislative body enforced the law that was passed back then? And I'm not asking just you, but I'm just saying.
Sure. Here you go. Use my mic.
This is the crystal clear reason why school buses haven't been fed. Because you got a school board to yell at about it. I get phone calls about school bus. My school bus broke down today. A little girl, a 13-year-old girl, sent me a letter that her school bus had broken down, and they had 70 kids sitting on a 50-person bus. She's mad at me. She thinks we own the buses. We don't own the buses. So when I so think about this. I know you're not, but here's the thing. As an elected official, when I say, hey, listen, I agree. It's terrible. I would love to do something about it. Will you call Neil? And they're like, well, I called you. You're the school board member. The reason they're not going to do anything about it is because across the state, not just our guys, they got somebody they can point their finger at. They know for a fact the people that are pissed off are going to call me and blame me. They know for a fact when there's a problem at the road in front of their house, they're going to be mad at Roy. Why will you change it when you get to go to Columbia and nobody holds you accountable? Hey, I love him because he showed up for a photo op at some kind of shindig that me and my friends had. But I hate that guy because of school buses. It's that guy. So the reason it's not going to get fixed, the reason it's not going to be prioritized is because you guys don't call them for what they're responsible for. So I'm telling you, just right now, right out of the gate, school buses are just a travesty, just a train wreck, just an opportunity waiting to happen. But it's poor families that don't vote and are never, ever going to put political pressure on anybody in Columbia. That's it. That's why they're not getting fixed. All this other stuff is just BS.
I've got to wrap this up. Rex, you got the mic in your hand. Jonathan, y'all, any closing thoughts? Look, I am on the very low end of being elected to anything. I mean, and I catch it. So I want each and every one of you guys that are in office or have stood for election and got out and knocked on doors and campaigned and got elected. You have my respect and my gratitude. And I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you serving. Absolutely. It is a service, and somebody's got to do it. It's one of those things where, your job has got to do it. And part of it is, no matter what you do, you're going to make someone angry, and a pretty good guy up and face it. It's easy to back. I appreciate coming. You're all invited to come back anytime you want. Especially these Pickens County guys. This is your party. That's your camera. These are your flags. You want to come here and speak anytime you want. Anytime we're having a meeting, you can come in and get the microphone and talk to the people. You're more than welcome. With that, thank all of you for coming out and making this a fun evening for me. And God bless you, and be safe going home. And John still takes cash, credit cards, and checks.